Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sherrod Davis. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Incubators Technologies. Really excited to have you all here with us today for today's version of Ecosystem Talks. Excited to have two of my industry friends here with me, Cameron Law, who's the executive director at the Carlson Center, and Julie Heath, the executive director at IU Innovates. Cameron, Julie, welcome. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Doing wonderful. Thanks for having me here.
So let's start by learning a little bit more about both of your organizations. I think one of the themes we may be able to tug on here are the similarities and the differences between the Carlson Center and IU Innovates. So Julie, do you want to just start by giving us a little bit of background on IU Innovates, how it came to be, what its mission is, et cetera?
Sure. This is a new university-wide initiative to accelerate entrepreneurship at Indiana University. It's part of our 2030 strategic plan. It's a priority that touches all the different parts of IU across the whole state. So that's the what and the why. I'd say the how is that we are going to ensure that IU entrepreneurs, which I'm defining as anyone with an iu.edu email address, so students, faculty, staff, know where to start and continually can access the right resource at the right time by integrating programs, incentives, resources that support them, giving everyone the greatest chance of success in their entrepreneurial journey.
Very cool. Cam, tell us about the Carlson Center.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me here, and great to be on a panel with Julie. I definitely have loved seeing all the growth of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Indiana and what you're going to be doing at IU Innovates. And so I lead a center called the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We're located in Sacramento, California, and based out of Sacramento State University, which is part of the CSU system. And we are fairly unique. We serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to start and scale their businesses. One of the unique things about the Carlson Center, we don't just serve Sac State students, we serve the broader region, and we define that kind of as the 6-county region MSA. And so we open kind of our doors to the broader community. And a lot of that was tied to two kind of things that I think we'll probably end up speaking to later on. But one, our main benefactor, his name's Dale Carlson. He was a local entrepreneur, graduated from Sacramento State, and upon exiting his company, which was a mattress company, decided to donate back to Sac State and really wanted to have this center serve the broader region and turn this region into a premier hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. With that, our president at Sac State kind of leaned into us being an anchor institution, which we always have been, but wanted to really create a porous element. And so really making sure that our resources were available. And so we're excited to continue to lean into fostering that entrepreneurial ecosystem and kind of seeing how we can create new job opportunities and prosperities through startups and small businesses.
Amazing. I think it's really interesting just knowing what I know about both of your backgrounds, that you've chosen to ecosystem build at a university. I'm curious why ecosystem building at a university is important, what advantages and disadvantages might exist from being that anchor institution within the ecosystem versus other organizational types, right? Government, nonprofit. Cameron, you want to start tackling that one?
Sure. Yeah. So my attraction was really to kind of the vision that our benefactor in the university had set of the center. So prior to me joining the Carlson Center, I've now been here 4 years, was really kind of this vision to serve as a regional hub and platform for supporting founders. And so I saw that kind of openness to not just, I love serving students and faculty and staff on campus, but that really anchored component in our community. And one of the ties that I saw was, if you look at the data, 65% of students that graduate from Sac State live and work in the region. And so I really saw this role that this center could have in impacting the mindset and the culture of our region, and really fostering that innovation and entrepreneurial appetite. And so that was kind of my interest in doing that. I think one of the major pros of, universities kind of fostering this activity is you do have something that's anchored and, quite, it's going to be here for a long period of time, right? And so when you look at these long-term initiatives, and I know, Julie, Heath, that the first time I think met you, you were quoting Startup Community Way and things like that. And so, you're always building 20 years from today, and that's sometimes hard as a nonprofit organization, right? You're doing the constant fundraising grind, where universities kind of have some of that built-in foundation and much easier to advance that work. And so I think that that's one of the pros, is it allows you to really think in the long term around some of this entrepreneurial ecosystem building. The challenges that I've seen, one is you are in a big monolith of processes and things like that. And so when you're trying to innovate and be entrepreneurial, sometimes there's barriers that you run into. And so I think that those are some of the challenges, is the speed at which community and entrepreneurial ecosystem building takes place, but then also what takes place on campus. And so finding that happy balance and being able to communicate across, those different lines. I think that, for me, that's been a passion. I've felt like a translator most of my career of like different ecosystems that I'm in. And so, we're excited of kind of how that continues to be fostered. But those would be the main pros and cons that I see. And happy to dive into kind of how I've addressed some of those later. But yeah, would love to turn it back to you, Sherrod.
Julie, same question. Why a university?
Yeah, well, and I'll build off of what Cameron said. I really appreciate that frame up of the anchor institution and the role it can play. There's three reasons that I am intrigued by with doing this work from a university. One is that it's the university's mission to continually push into new intellectual terrain through research. And there's very few organizations that have that as a mission mandate. And then dovetailing with that, the dissemination of knowledge through teaching. So you have the creation of the knowledge, new knowledge, and then you have the dissemination of it. And then the third one is probably the one I've come to most recently in realizing the unique role a university can play, and it has to do with time. So a lot of new knowledge creation in tomorrow's economy, those areas where you have totally disparate expertises coming together to create something new, it can take a really long time, whether it's the new technology, new material, new molecule, new method for solving a complex system problem. It might take 6, 7, 11 years to go from this is the hunch we're working with this problem set, all the way out to, okay, this thing is out in the real world affecting real customers or beneficiaries. So to go from hunch to first customer in 10 or 11 years, university is one of the few organizations that can operate on that extended timeline and play that long game.
That's a really interesting angle, I think, Julie. One I hadn't really thought about, for one of the key advantages for why universities have been so good and could be so good in some cases at fostering innovation. And so I'm curious how you all see the university interacting with other ecosystem players that we typically think of, government, ESOs that we talk about. Like, how can the university, from where they sit, help to connect the dots amongst other ecosystem players in a way that's meaningful for the entire region that they might be within? Julie, I know we've talked about this, so I'll start with you.
And I'm very curious to hear what Cameron has to say on this, since that's part of his mandate. I'll step back to my prior role working for the state of Indiana and with our Secretary of Commerce putting forward a priority for entrepreneurship for the whole state. I ended up reaching out to the university to get their help in terms of asking some of those big picture impact questions. So I couldn't have done that just from a state employee's purview. I needed to partner with the university to start to say, hey, we need to be able to articulate the return on investing in creating the conditions for entrepreneurship, especially if in economic development, if improved quality of life and doing so through expanding the capacity of individuals and firms and communities to maximize their talents, whether it's toward innovation, lowering transaction costs, responsibly producing goods. The universities can contribute through the capacity and talent development, but also in this question of, do we need new metrics? Like, are we actually measuring the new things that we should be measuring? And so I needed to work with some very smart data scientists and economists at the university in order to start coming up with new ways to measure economic health and community flourishing through entrepreneurship ecosystems.
I love it. So I think, one of the things for us in kind of engaging the broader community, I think a lot of it was timing. So in terms of the center, we came online, and I know that that's like a very outdated term, but nonetheless, we came online. And, when we looked at the role of the center, one of the big challenges I was facing when I first started was most people saw the center as the physical space. So it was like the center on campus, and that's like what we had to offer was the center and like the physical programming. And so oftentimes when we're trying to have a regional impact, I looked at it was really about the connections and relationships with people. And ultimately, when an institution is working across aligned with the organization, whether that's an entrepreneurial support organization, an ESO, or an economic development organization or something of that sort. It's really the people-to-people interactions, and why are we working together strategically to advance some initiative. It could be around building out an innovation cluster. It could be about focusing on supporting startups, say female-led startups or racialized entrepreneurs, whatever that might be, to be more focused and intentional in those types of efforts. And so one of the things that we looked at was, we called it like the triangle of success. And this came from our founder, Dale Carlson. He talked about that as a center, we had to balance two things, one of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and one of that of the academic ecosystem. And they both drive success to entrepreneurs and people in our entrepreneurial ecosystem in different ways. But if we're too heavy on one, we're likely not able to truly support our founders and entrepreneurs in the right way. Meaning, if we get too academic heavy, we're not likely to have that real world practical experience and hands-on ability to commercialize, and then vice versa. If we don't have the research, it might not back up those types of things. And so using that kind of framework, as well as the Anchor University, allowed us that kind of ability to go out to the community and do so. And the reason I say timing was really key for us in doing this work was I saw the barrier of people just seeing us as that physical space. And early in my tenure, which was, in March of 2020, we all know what happened in terms of the pandemic. And so we really had to open up to being a virtual connector. And so it was about, how do we actually take our resources and connect people digitally and virtually to provide resources and getting them started. And so people started to see us as the connective network and web versus the physical space that we had always kind of been seen as. And so now that's when we talk about the center, we're that hub and platform, which is really the people and network that we're ultimately trying to get an entrepreneur to navigate, right? When we think of entrepreneurial successes, how quickly can they navigate the resources and people to get from point A to B? And so sometimes it's not even about us being a program, it's about them coming in saying, hey, I need support with getting my app developed or this certain set of my website developed. And well, great, we have students that need senior projects and they want to work on these types of innovative ideas. And so then they can pair that with the class project where they're providing support to a startup or small business, but also getting this hands-on experience, right? And so it's a much more curated fashion in that way. And so yeah, that's kind of a little bit how we've like engaged the community. And it's not always from a programmatic lens. It's sometimes just that relationship and saying, hey, we're a connector on campus, and then also for off-campus people, we're connecting them to the resources on campus. So
Amazing. I'm curious, because even just hearing both of you talk, there's so much going on. There's so much activity, I think, that you both and your organizations are stewarding. Like, how are you defining success at the Carlson Center and at IU Innovates? Like, we talked about the long game, right? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you look back and you're like, this was really successful. Like, what has happened and what are we measuring over time?
Well, I think, do you mind if I hop in, Julie? Because I think I'll build, I feel like just from our last question, Julie's got the metrics, I got the qualitative storytelling. And I think there's a mix of both in terms of measuring success, but how we've looked at success for us, we've kind of looked at it from 3 different lenses. So the first is, when we're looking at student success, part of it is not just them creating new businesses off the ground, but really the ability for them to engage the startup community and the small business community, and having an ability to jump into a career and being successful in engaging that, right? So one of the keys to building our entrepreneurial ecosystem is more people working for small businesses and startups, as well as being ecosystem builders, right? And so partly seeing people have more confidence going into that space and seeing that as a role. We've started to see that as a level of student success, is where people are staying and working in Sacramento, but now they're not jumping into which our main industry is government, where, the state capital. And so we have a lot of people that go into those industries. And so when we start to diversify that with our workforce, hopping into more startup and small business community, will really add that capacity to our region. Secondly is similar lines is actually like new business starts and, raising capital and increasing revenues. So we've seen a lot of that from our community-based programs. A couple that I would highlight is our Lean Innovator and Fourth Wave program. Fourth Wave is an accelerator that we co-lead for women-led technology companies. We partnered with a nonprofit who's on our advisory board to run that program. We've run 4 virtual cohorts, and we've seen them raise over $50 million for their startups. And so, we're tracking those types of metrics to measure success along that continuum. The last is really kind of I think where it's a little bit harder to measure sometimes, is that connectedness of an ecosystem and those types of things, right? It's like, oh, how do you tell if the ecosystem is doing well? It's like, well, one, we're actually talking about Sacramento's entrepreneurial ecosystem, so that's success. Whereas, in the past we weren't really talking about that, right? But you start to see events and activities, but one of the measures I've seen is partly just how are we being better coordinated, and is that work being funded? And so recently, we had gone for a state grant as well as some city grants that we didn't get, but it was kind of that driving force for us to connect. It was kind of where, again, timing is key. So it was like, we knew we needed to do the work. Let's rally around a funding opportunity, but not just for the funding opportunity's sake. And so we ended up not getting the grant back in 2021. And one of my main co-conspirators, Monique Brown with the Growth Factory, we're like, you know what, we're going to continue to do this work anyways, right? Like, this is what we need to be doing. And we continue that on. And that actually led us to, launching the NorCal Entrepreneur Hub, which is our EcoMap. So we're a proud EcoMap customer. So we're launching that and have had great success with that. But that led us to this year actually getting designated for the grant we did not get the first go around, which is one of the inclusive innovation hubs that the state funds. So we're one of 13 hubs being recognized across the state. And so for us, that's, tangible success of that work being rewarded, one, monetarily, but it's also the designation that people see that connectivity of our region. And so those are kind of the ways that I would look at how we define success. And look at kind of those 3 different pillars of our work.
Well, and I'll probably be able to bucket it similarly in terms of those outputs that are measurable, and then some of those outcomes that are a little bit squishier, but it's the future that we all want. So we do have some outputs in terms of IU students, faculty, having the entrepreneurial mindset and skill set to be able to launch businesses, commercialize innovation, and drive innovation. And whether that's entrepreneurial activity that we count through activities or actual startups, we'll probably measure both. I should mention I'm 2 months into this new job, so we are still working on what our success metrics are. And then ultimately being able to point to all of the IU innovations that are out there in the real world, having a real world impact. That's really what the narrative arc we're looking for. And then going back to something Cameron said earlier about the specifics of meeting an entrepreneur, where they are, getting real clear on where are you now? Where do you want to be in 6 months? What are you stuck on today? How quickly can we get you unstuck? One of the things that I am most excited about is working with some network scientists here at IU, being able to create that visualization of, I call it know-how flow, know-how flowing from the person who has it, whether it's an investor, an expert, a peer, a serial entrepreneur, an alumni who started a company, back to the IU entrepreneur who needs it. Can we look at that quantitatively in terms of, okay, so we had a student entrepreneur surface this thing that they're stuck on. Okay, can we get that introduction done quickly so that that conversation can happen and that knowledge or that know-how can flow from whoever has it back to the student entrepreneur? And then, of course, there's I think the qualitative part of that. What is the impact of getting unstuck very quickly and in at a tempo where we've built the system to get them unstuck, and we've said out loud that is the purpose of this connectedness, and being able to then figure out how to visualize it so it's easy to see in a visualization and then understand, oh, okay, this is about the web of relationships, as Cameron pointed out, more than anything else, and what flows through that web.
Amazing. I think that there's two themes that I just want to go a little bit deeper on that you've both alluded to. Julie just talked about, what was it, Julie? The know-how flow. I haven't heard
I
that
like that.
yet. So that
You
was
better, Julie, you got to trademark that one, the know-how flow.
And then Cameron gave an interesting example of the university going out and seeking funding from the city and the state, but that in some ways catalyzed more connectivity by raising your hand and saying, like, here is what we are working on. I'm curious how, from where you all sit, where you've seen successful strategies to connect the dots between the university and organizations that exist outside of the ecosystem, or the university's four walls, I guess I should say. And what are those strategies that you've tried to use that haven't been super successful?
Julie, would you want to go first, or you want me to? All right, I'll go first. So I think, again, I'll look at it like similar to the pillars. I think engaging entrepreneurs has been different than engaging like support organizations and economic development organizations. So I'll bucket it in those two elements. So engaging entrepreneurs, one of the big challenges and connecting the dots, and I'll get to like how we solved that challenge, was we traditionally had like the very like Sacramento State branding. And so one of the challenges entrepreneurs had was like, especially if we're trying to engage the greater Sacramento region, was if you didn't go to Sac State, you weren't an alumni or don't go there, they're like, well, this resource isn't for me, right? Like your programs aren't part of my wheelhouse. I'm not an alumni, et cetera. And so trying to get over that barrier of where our resources are for you, and we're here to support you in your entrepreneurial journey. And so one of the things we did was we actually rebranded the Carlson Center in line with the university's branding guidelines, but we used kind of different mark as well as color palette to demonstrate that we are more open to this broader region. And that's had a tremendous impact for us attracting entrepreneurs, because they see themselves connecting to that resource versus the institution that they might not have gone to or even seen themselves going to, right? And so that kind of allowed us to be more connected in doing that, and then also successfully partnering with organizations to engage their network so we can get more deep into the community. And that's where, kind of looking at how we've engaged organizations was, I found a lot of organizations want to connect to a university. It adds a lot of credibility to their work if they're seeking funding, or you're seeking funding together. A lot of times that marriage from a university and a nonprofit goes really well for grant opportunities. And so I think there's a lot of that attraction to connecting the dots. But I think, again, it goes back to people, right? I would say I don't come from academia. That wasn't the mindset that I brought into it. And I kind of leveraged my relationships and community to say, hey, how do we take this center out into the community and connect those dots? And so leveraging relationships that I had to foster those types of opportunities. And one really kind of powerful vehicle we've used is our advisory board. So we have an advisory board as part of the Carlson Center, and we have regional leaders such as our CEO of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council and CEOs of other, like the Asian Chamber of Commerce and a variety of organizations that allow us to have that connectivity, and they know what we're working on, and we know where we can connect those dots for those types of organizations. And so that's kind of been the strategy that we've employed. But a lot of it's been us kind of saying and putting out there that, hey, our goal is to serve as a hub and play that connector role. Not everyone wants to do the work of convening, especially if it's not being paid to be done, right? And so that's kind of where we were able to lean on being a university and having that somewhat of that capacity to be able to resource it, to then say, hey, we'll take that step forward and help kind of coordinate some of those efforts. But knowing then where, hey, we need the ESO or the EDOs to take the lead from there. I hope that answered your question. I don't know if it did. But
Yeah, no, that was perfect. That was perfect, Cameron. And I'll ask the same question to Julie and maybe reiterate it a little differently. But it's really about the university's role in connecting the dots between other ecosystem players.
Got it.
Yeah. And so what's worked, what hasn't worked? I'm 8 weeks in. I think what I should probably point to is past work, either as I was employee number 1 at a startup, and then I went over and was executive director at Indiana's oldest co-working space for entrepreneurs before doing the state level work. So I'll pull from some of those. And what we have found in that know-how flow is a sense of demand side and supply side. So if you think of the supply side of the knowledge and the resources, it might come from your accelerator mentors, your accountants, your legal advisors who are coming in, the serial entrepreneur who's able to come in and share that wisdom. That's the supply side of the knowledge or the know-how. And I think what we're doing now is we're anchoring on the demand side in terms of meeting the entrepreneur where they are and saying, what are you stuck on today? Because the nice thing about approaching this through that complex systems lens is you acknowledge that you can't actually predict what's going to happen. If someone's solving something for the first time, there's no blueprint for how they're going to solve it by definition. So what we can do is very intentionally say, we're going to focus on their just-in-time need, the demand of everybody's just-in-time need, which is a really hard problem to solve. The idea that every single time we do this connecting and convening work, we are saying, yep, there's going to be a bespoke ask that I can't predict. And it's really nuanced and specific to not just that person and their business model and the type of problem they're solving, but where they are this week. That's hard, but it's also the way to ensure that when we reach back out to the other ecosystem actors, we know what the ask is. We understand what the job to be done is right now. And even if the job to be done is a 15-minute conversation, the idea is if we can find, we know the experts here. It's just a numbers game in terms of we've got 90,000 undergraduates across Indiana University, over 20,000 graduates. They get 770,000 living alumni. Someone knows. We just have to find the someone. And then when we do find the someone who can help the entrepreneur get unstuck, we can coach up that entrepreneur to say, if you only have 5 minutes with this person, what are you going to ask? How are you going to ask it? How do you make sure that you have spec'd out that gap in your know-how so clearly, so tightly, that if you only get that person for 5 minutes, you're actually going to make that progress that you hope to make?
I think that's really interesting, Julie. We've started using a term internally, like the last mile of information, right? Like there's this like last mile delivery problem in logistics. We can get it to the warehouse, but we like can't get it to your house, right? It's sort of what you're facing in some ways by having such a complex and vast network at IU, 770,000 living alums, right? But it's like, how do we get what they have? It's all right here into the hands of someone who needs it right now. So I think that that's really, really interesting. And if able to be solved, right, unlocks so much opportunity for the entrepreneurs that are in the IU network. So I'll be curious how the results go with sort of the networking with the professors, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the role of incubators and accelerators at universities and how those contribute to economic growth. Have you guys tried those at Carlson, at IU Innovates? What were the results? What were the learnings? I know that I've heard kind of a mixed bag from folks in similar shoes, so I'm curious your thoughts. Do you want to start, Cameron?
Sure. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure I didn't just hop right on in. But yeah, in terms of, us kind of experimenting and getting started, again, and we're fairly new as a center in general. We're in our like fifth going on kind of sixth year of like operations, and much of that was during a pandemic. So we're kind of getting our feet off the ground, but we've kind of found ourselves, and this kind of ties to the past conversation we've been having, is like, what is our role in the ecosystem? Is not necessarily to play like the later stage accelerator component of things, but really seeing ourselves as a feeder to the ecosystem. So part of that being both like a workforce of innovative and entrepreneurial thinking individuals, but also of the earliest stage companies. So we found ourselves kind of sitting from idea to pre-seed. Idea to seed is a little bit of a stretch, I would say, on the seed stage, but we've found ourselves kind of falling in more of the, I don't know if it's even a real term, but the pre-accelerator element of things, right? So we see ourselves kind of at that customer discovery element. And so we found that our key role is how can we educate as many people in our region about the core foundations of starting an innovative and scalable startup through that customer discovery process, and kind of teaching those foundations. And so that's what we've kind of focused on as our main focus. And that's where we partner with organizations like the Growth Factory, which is a funded accelerator in our community. And our goal is to get people to that level where that that actual venture fund and accelerator is funding them to grow. We did partner with Fourth Wave, which is an accelerator for women-led technology companies, and that's where we don't necessarily fully run it internally just as the Carlson Center. We've partnered with them, and we add capacity through our entrepreneurs in residence to help co-lead that program, and that's where we're actually more at that accelerator stage of things. And so that's kind of how we've seen it. And that was partly just of like a scan of the ecosystem and where do we best sit in that game, and how can we best support the region in doing so. And we found that as kind of like that idea to pre-seed and serving as kind of that feeder to the broader ecosystem. So that's kind of been our approach.
Yeah, we are seeing something similar here in that that feeder idea, being able to introduce people to that entrepreneurial mindset and journey and skill set from idea, or even sometimes we call it the hunch phase up to pre-seed, or wherever that first indicator of progress is based on whatever the business model is. I think being mindful that we are in a enablement type of role, where we are trying to say, do you have a sense of a problem you want to solve? How are you going about solving it? What have you tapped into? And then the other part that's specific to incubation is I am new to this university. I am not interested in inventing wheels that are already here. I'd rather go and find all the existing wheels, and there's a really phenomenal student incubator called Shoebox at the Shoemaker Innovation Center out of the Luddy School here at IU. And so I'd much rather say to the Shoebox folks, what do you need for this phenomenal wheel you've already invented? Do you need, let's go with the metaphor. Do you need retread? Do you need more air? Do you need a new axle for your that's attaching your wheel? You see what I'm saying? That I would rather make sure that the incubation or acceleration programs that currently exist are resourced the way they need to be resourced to keep doing what they're doing well. And then as we identify these existing strengths in incubation or acceleration and add resources to them, then we can also, as we make the invisible visible in terms of the resources around the university, say, are there actual gaps? And when we find those gaps, we'll be able to say, okay, how might we fill those gaps?
Can I add one thing? It's just a quick question first, Julie. Is IU a R1 institution?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting distinction, I think, between IU and Sac State is, Sac State's not an R1 institution, so we're not a full, technology research component of things, right? And so compared, to IU or in our ecosystem, we have UC Davis, which is an R1 institution that brings in, $1 billion or more each year in terms of innovation research, right? And so thinking partly of what is your role within the ecosystem and connecting that type of element of things, and not that we aren't supporting and not that we're not seeing innovative technology ideas, but not necessarily in terms of the research that's being translated out of the university. And so I think as we move forward, and that's been something that our new president is focused on, is continuing to grow as a research institution. That will then maybe be where we evolve some of our pre-accelerators into accelerators as we have some of those components, and you have, with that comes budgets of, technology transfer offices and things like that enable some of that commercialization.
I was actually just gonna go there, and so I'll direct the question to Julie. What is the relationship between IU Innovates and the tech transfer office, and how do these two components fit together to drive entrepreneurship at IU?
Right, good question. And so our commercialization office is really focusing on those concrete steps toward licensing, towards patents. I think we're going to be figuring out what those dovetailed handoffs look like. So if IU Innovates and our new space that's right out, for those who are familiar with Bloomington or IU, right outside the sample gates in the Von Lee building, it's at the intersection of campus and the city. So being able to have a friction-free front door where we say, if you are in the entrepreneurial journey, if you are interested in entrepreneurship, you have a door to walk through, and there is someone there on the other side of the door to say, okay, where are you? Where do you want to go? Making sure that we very quickly are able to get that person over to the commercialization office. It happened yesterday where we had a faculty member introduced to us working on a really great social impact startup, and being able to immediately make that introduction and say, they already have their executive summary, they've actually created this video, they have a dashboard explaining what the problem they're trying to solve, or they are solving, and then being able to do that introduction to say, okay, let's get you plugged into our commercialization office. And then as there are moments in this case, that faculty entrepreneur's journey, if it falls outside of what the commercialization office currently offers, maybe that's something that we then can co-create together if there's that gap that we mentioned earlier that we have the opportunity to now fill.
Very interesting. I think I want to zoom out a little bit more, just because we only have a few minutes left before we'll go to the audience for questions. But what, from your perspective, is the biggest hurdle to what you guys are doing right now? What's the biggest challenge? Is it funding, personnel, time? I mean, you tell me. I'm curious from where you sit, what makes this difficult? Julie, you want to start?
Sure. Because I'm so early in this job, I think just the learning curve for me personally at this step, I'll probably have a better answer in 6 or 12 months in terms of what the challenges are. I think right now, from my lens, I just have a steep learning curve, so it's probably not a fair answer based on the systems challenges.
Well, let me ask you a different question then, Julie. Let's take IU specifically out of it, and let's focus on ecosystem building broadly. And then when we do our follow-up webinar, we can compare that answer to the challenges specifically at IU.
Okay, I appreciate you not letting me off the hook there. I think we have this really cool opportunity to start to succinctly get our elevator pitch right as ecosystem builders. And I'll give you a concrete example. So before, when I was at the state and we had this 2-year stint where entrepreneurship was a priority for the state of Indiana, put forward by our Secretary of Commerce, sometimes you're in that elevator ride with a legislator or an agency head or someone in the governor's office, and that person doesn't care about entrepreneurship, and you have an elevator ride to get them to care. And because I was working within the umbrella of economic development, usually the person I was talking to was expecting me to talk about tomorrow's jobs or economic health and the metrics around that. So the most important phrase that we ended up being able to say was this one. In 2021, over 11.3 billion of our GDP was driven by Indiana companies under 5 years of age. That phrase got the attention of whoever else was in the elevator, and was able to convey that this, in aggregate, young companies and the people who are putting these new products and services out into the world, they matter in aggregate a lot. And it's a B number. So let's start there and talk about how we can now calculate the return on investing in entrepreneurship ecosystems, so that whatever that return is, whether it's tomorrow's jobs, whether it's money back into the state's coffers, whether it's some other return that we want to measure, we now can do it because we understand how big the impact is of entrepreneurs on the economic health of our state. So I see the biggest challenge and opportunity to be figuring out, okay, what are those other phrases that we as entrepreneurship ecosystem builders can say that really nail the messaging in terms of this is worth investing in.
I think that's really insightful, Julie, and it's one of the reasons why most of the time during the ecosystem talks, I do want to anchor around what is the North Star, because I feel like it varies based on the organization that the person is coming from, where they are, right? Like there's this interesting intersection between entrepreneurship and ecosystem building, where they're related, obviously, but they aren't always the same. And so economic development, right, has been around for longer. I think people more clearly understand what that is. And so I think you're exactly right in sort of starting to use shared language to describe what it is ecosystem building is something that I think could really advance the field quite a bit. I know we've had a number of conversations about it, and you went where I wanted you to go. So thanks for letting me ask my question in a different way. Cameron, same question to you. Biggest challenge facing you and your role at the Carlson Center from what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think it'd be along the similar lines. I took note of that, so I'll have to find the number for the Greater Sacramento region that will help us with our pitch of why ecosystem building and why entrepreneurship is a driver for economic development. I think that I'll put that more in kind of like a personal lens. I think part of that challenge of telling the story is, one, there's not a ton of people doing that work. So it's like you have like a smaller group trying to tell the story, so you don't have as many people in terms of capacity to do the work in general, and then also to like crowdsource what language makes sense, right? You have less at bats if you have smaller amount of people ultimately going to do that work and seeing what lands. And so I definitely took note of that number. I think that makes sense. And so I think part of the challenge is, back to one of your questions of like connecting the dots. If there's not a ton of people doing the dot connecting, capacity is always an issue to where, hey, I have to run programs to support entrepreneurs to demonstrate success, to say entrepreneurship is a core driver for economic development. So I have to have that return. But I also, in order to do that, you have to be connecting people and organizations to do that. And so I think it's just a lot for not a ton of people doing that work. And I think the language is a challenge, because in order to get people to do this work, you have to be able to communicate why this work matters to them. And I think we've made a lot of progress, I think, nationally about that. And I think even here locally, I think we have a long way to go. But I think we are making progress. And I think that it's starting to be more recognized of why entrepreneurship-led economic development is a key driver. And so I think it's just kind of continuing to translate and get people engaged in that ecosystem and finding ways that they can plug into that overall work. But I'd say that's been my biggest challenge, is like, how do you scale the know-how flow if not everyone knows the know-how of like who to connect to that information and what organizations to go about doing that. And so I think, I know I brought you all up earlier, but really that's been our intention of engaging you all at EcoMap in our NorCal Entrepreneur Hub, is to scale that work, right? Like there's so much capacity that ecosystem builders can bring to their community. And so how can you help scale that and help tell that story? And part of, again, that data is how can we collect that data and tell that story to be more impactful? And so I think we're kind of right at the, with any challenge is the opportunity to grow and see how we can create a solution. And I think that those are what we're doing. And as a field in general, I'm excited about things that the International Economic Development Council has been doing, of really focusing on entrepreneurship-led economic development. And so I think continuing that work will get more people and add more capacity. The last thing I would say is, like, I think with that is with not a ton of people having that language yet, it's been hard. I've found it hard in funding opportunities when they say we're doing ecosystem funding, they still want to fund direct programs, not ecosystem building. And so it's been really challenging of like positioning what we're doing, but then you're not successful because they want you to run a specific program, and you're like, well, that's not ecosystem building. But so I think as we grow that language and conversation, and I'm going to borrow Julie's thoughts there and helping look at that, and I think that could really help us overall. So I'll stop there.
How have you found, Julie, telling the story of ecosystem building, right? Like what strategies have you used? How might you advise Cameron to tackle the issue that he just raised in terms of how did he phrase it? Ecosystem building, but really they're referencing programming versus the broader connectivity. And I only bring this up because I know it's something that you and I have talked about a lot.
Yeah, and Cameron, I think you said it well when you phrased it as why this work matters to you. So whoever it is you're talking to, what are those outcomes that they are driving toward? And then being able to reverse engineer the steps to get back to, okay, here's the power of paying the connectors. And we did this in my last job, and this, Sherrod, because it was part of our work with EcoMap in terms of creating these ecosystem navigators. And those job descriptions, they were connectors. 40% of their time was expected to be connecting between all of the resources and entrepreneurs and the resources. And then 40% of their time was about connecting entrepreneurs to each other and to near peers. So if you're saying, no, we have this job description, we're actually paying people to be connectors. That's the widget. I think it helped to be able to start with those big economic impact numbers. It also helped to do the anecdotal storytelling. So I don't know if it's going to work with this Zoom. No, can't see it. I was going to show the yearbook for this year. We have this big coffee table magazine that's called Entrepreneurship Indiana. 2023 dropped during Global Entrepreneurship Week. And the idea there is you can flip to the table of contents and see all the 92 counties in Indiana and say to someone, well, what counties do you care about? Because we're gonna flip to that page and show you the entrepreneur who's creating the economy of tomorrow in the county that you care about. And it's quite likely that in the near future here, we're going to be able to break down those GDP numbers down at the county level so that we can say, here are the people actually doing the work. And so the anecdotes here, the big picture ROI data is here. And now we have these connectors, which are brand new jobs that didn't exist before. And their goal is to take that wonderful inventory of resources that we had in EcoMap and be able to make sure that when they meet the entrepreneur where they are, they can get to the right resource, which is it's EcoMap wisdom that the resource has to exist and then it has to be available and then it has to be accessible and then you have to be able to understand it before you utilize it. So making sure that there are people paid to do those, to understand those steps and then to do those steps, I think that's a big part of this.
Amazing. Thanks, Julie. We're coming up on time here quickly. So if you're attending the webinar and you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. I've got just a couple more for Cameron and Julie. The first is, how do you envision the future of university-led economic development? Julie, you mentioned something really interesting at the outset, which was this concept for IU Innovates was in, I think you said, the president's 2030 strategic plan. And what we are seeing from our perspective is more of that across the country, this emphasis on entrepreneurship and ecosystem building at universities. I'm curious from where you sit, how you see this industry, which I'll call university-led economic development or university-led ecosystem building, evolving over time, and maybe touch on why specifically it was important for IU and the president to mention this as one of the pillars in the strategic plan.
I think as we progress in this work, we're going to find those nuggets of wisdom around the power of it. And as we share from university to university, hey, this is what works. And we didn't even realize that this would be so powerful. I can envision many more universities taking on this activity as a priority area and building it into their infrastructure, whether it's through staff positions or that connective tissue between all of the activities they already have going on. If we're able to say in 2 years' time, now that we can track the know-how flow and we can actually show that it drives the outcomes that we want, whether they're 5 years out or 3 years out, we'll be able to create that theory of change and say these activities of connecting and understanding the know-how flow and then seeing the know-how flow and improving the know-how flow will lead to these outputs and then these outcomes. Once we have that theory of change that we can share across universities, I think we will see some very powerful narratives and data that we can't predict yet, but that'll be a driver then in terms of this being more widely adopted.
Yeah, creating a mechanism by which the successes and the challenges are being shared across similar organizations between folks in similar roles, I think will be critical for the future of university-led economic development or university-led ecosystem building. Last question for both of you. As we think about the future of this specific industry or these specific roles, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in, a similar role to the executive director of Carlson Center or IU Innovates? Like, what would you want to tell them as they got started? And I'll go to Cameron first.
What advice would I mean, I think the first thing like that came to mind was like, you just got like, for me was I felt like I just had to show love for the community and build things as I went. I don't think there's I think there's best practices, but I don't think every ecosystem's certainly the same, right? And so I think you can identify what other universities or other ecosystems are doing, but it has to be true to your community and your partnerships and relationships. And so I think, yes, seeking insights from outside your region or your state to bring those best practices in, but really bringing that and connecting it to your community. And, I speak a lot about, the work that I do, I feel like it for me is an expression of love for the Sacramento region. And so it's like, how do we foster that and through the entrepreneurial mindset and spirit? And so I think I would say, look outwards and see what models have existed and how you can replicate and not reinvent the wheel. But again, having your community's touch point on doing so. And then the last thing for me was really something impactful for me. I felt like was everyone wanted to know what my vision was going to be for the center from like day one. And I was like, I appreciate the question and, here's some initial thoughts, but it was, I need to listen to our university community. I need to listen to our entrepreneurial ecosystem. Like, what do they see the Carlson Center serving as? Do you see us as the hub that we, thought we might be, or what role do you see us serving in? And so sourcing that insight allows you to kind of step into that vision that your ecosystem is already seeing for you. And is that something then that you can build ultimately around, because that's what the system's wanting you to play that particular role. And so that for me was a really key element of kind of going on a listening tour, both on your campus and community, to identify what that role needs to be.
Yeah, I'm gonna just pick up, Cameron, what you said in terms of the listening tour and listening, because it's a web of relationships. It's not about one person or one entity. It's about what you can do only together, not what one person or one organization can do. So in my listening tour, one of the things I talk about a lot is the connections between all of the existing activities. So to answer your question, the advice I'd give is do your listening tour, understand who's doing the work. And I'm always quick to point to the very concrete examples at our Johnson Center at the Kelly School of Business, of the Elmore Entrepreneurship Clinic, of the Innovation and Commercialization Office, of the Shoemaker Innovation Center, of IU Ventures, and then the community collaborators like over at the Mill with their Entrepreneurship Center. Being able to very quickly say, here is what each of those entities is working on, and what might we build together that isn't possible if we aren't intentional about that connective tissue. So that's one bucket of advice. The other bucket of advice is know your entrepreneurs. Like, who are your first 6 entrepreneurs who you are going to be on a weekly texting basis with? Because if they don't succeed, then none of this matters.
Amazing way to end it. Julie, Cameron, thank you guys so much for spending some time with us on Ecosystem Talks. If you want to connect with Julie and Cameron, you can find them both on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about EcoMap, you can check us out at www.ecomap.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter to hear about upcoming ecosystem talks, and where we'll share things that we're hearing from our ecosystem. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.